Hey, welcome, everybody. Welcome to week 3 of Conversations in Anarchy. I'm Yogi Ev Kopelson here, and I'm joined with my co-hosts, Catherine and Angel. We are so excited to have you here this week. We have a lot going on. The hotel rooms are going to be available starting October 22nd. So that's just in a week. They will sell out. The first round of main stage speakers have been announced for Anarchapulco. You can come to our website at anarchapulco.com. There's a lot of information on the website, including kind of what to expect if you get a ticket and you've never been there before. There's tons of FAQs. We're posting weekly blog updates on our blog. And in the coming weeks, we're going to be announcing the rest of the stages. So anyway, spreading word of personal freedom is what we're all about. And here at Conversations at Anarchy, we're just so happy to have you here and join us. But before I go into the meat of this week, I want to introduce our co-hosts, Catherine and Angel. And so I'm going to throw it to Catherine right now.
Hey guys, I'm Catherine. I am co-producing Anarchapulco this year and all things health and wellness with the Anarch Awaken stage, my personal passion. I'm an unschooling mom. I live in a converted school bus. This is the Bitcoin.com bus that I live inside of for 4.5 years now, and it is an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Hey guys, I am Angel Robinson. I am the editor of the Anarchapulco blog. I am on the content team, and I was also the editor of the Anarchist Guide to the Galaxy. I am an unschooling mom, a steadfast, philosophical anarchist, and I am here to help bring about freedom.
Awesome. So in these conversations in Anarchy, we are using our ebook, The Anarchist Guide to the Galaxy, which you can get on our website at anarchapulco.com. It's a free ebook. I'm sure anyone on the call already has the ebook, but make sure to go ahead and read it. And each week we're kind of diving into the topics that we're taking on in the ebook. And so, hey, David Rodriguez is here. So happy to see you, man. You know what? Let me throw it to you right now for a quick introduction, and then we'll come back and we'll get into the meat of the stuff. So everyone, David Rodriguez is here. Yo.
Yo, what's up, champion? So happy to be here with Evan and Angel and Catherine and everyone here. I'm running the three-year family camp stage here. I've been attending every year since the beginning, and I also am principal of a private school, publisher of a book by John Taylor Gatto, The Underground History of the School System. One of my purposes on this plan is to get kids out of the compulsory school system. So happy to join you with this exciting conversation for today.
All right. So glad you can be here, David. So glad we're all here with you guys. Just a couple of reminders. First of all, we're not here to teach you guys anything. We're all collectively, that's us and you guys, exploring these topics of living anarchy. And in these calls, we're sharing stuff about ourselves. We're sharing stories. We're going to be, there's background noise coming from somebody's speaker. I'm not sure who it is. Yeah, so maybe if you're not talking, if you mute yourself out, that would be awesome. So again, these are topics we all really care about. We all have come to anarchy in a different way, in our own way. By the way, I'm the marketing director for Anarchapulco and the community instigator. And the way I've been living anarchy goes back to leaving the workforce, and kind of discovering healing after I realized I was really sick and broken from all the indoctrination and years of that. And I'm going to go and unpack a lot of that next week, kind of in the natural healing topic that we're going to do. But today's topic, actually, if we can throw up the slide for today, we're going to get into the really juicy stuff today. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of you guys that are on the call are going to want to come in and talk about this today. So today we're talking about war and borders, international policy, kind of the whole idea of countries, safety and security. So this is a real meat of anarchy and statism. And so I'd kind of like to throw it to one of my co-hosts, any one of the three of you who want to jump in and kind of introduce this topic of anarchy and statism, and share something about why this particular topic resonates with you and is meaningful. Obviously, it goes to the core of living together and in groups and everything. So go ahead and take this away.
Hey, yeah, I'll jump in there. This is a big issue because it's one of the issues that divides even people who believe in liberty with respect to the state. A lot of us, it's the one issue where some of us believe that the state is the only way to really properly address, the world on an international stage when we talk about war and national security. But there are answers, and it really does, like you said, take a little bit of getting rid of the indoctrination, understanding how we got in this place of complexity with the internet on the international stage in the first place. And then instead of thinking about what is right now, we can think about what could be in a free society. And I'm pretty passionate about that because I definitely want people to understand that this is not some anarchy or freedom isn't something that only works in certain areas. It works across the board and for the same reasons across the board. So that's kind of my intro.
Yeah, that's awesome, Angel. How about Kat or David? You guys want to jump in on this a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So for me, this is a really important issue for two reasons. One, because I'm anti-war, and that's really what got me involved in activism. And I believe that in general, when there are two large groups of people fighting each other physically, it's instigated by the state. I don't believe in general people are inclined to fight at this level. It's also financed by funny money, right? So that's what makes it possible. But the second issue for me is the right to travel. I believe that as a human being born and existing on this planet, I have a right to explore this planet. My children have a right to explore this planet. You have a right to explore this planet. And so borders and IDs and passports and driver's licenses, these types of things, they matter to me because I believe that we inherently, as free people, have a right to travel, and that is being slowly eroded away by borders, by identification cards and things like that. So that's kind of my personal take on this subject.
That's a really interesting thing as well, because when we talk about borders and are they necessary, it loops back into last week, which was taxation. And it almost seems like borders only matter when you buy into the taxation scheme, because then you're paying taxes. And then you're like, well, my tax money has to go to pay for these resources and other people aren't paying in. And then they're going to get the resources if they come across the border. And I just, I find it so fascinating right now that we're having these conversations, because I didn't really think about the fundamental concept of borders being an extension of the concept of taxation. So it's like the way indoctrination seems to work is like, first they sell us that we need to pay taxes to get the roads built, and then they stick us with the borders and all of that stuff. It's really interesting how it all kind of fits together. David, you got any feedback on this?
Absolutely. War is a euphemism for mass murder. And if you look at a study from the University of Hawaii, they made a term called democide, death by government in the 20th century. How many people died by their own governments? 260 million. This is an official study. And so this has got to be the height or the aim of freedom. We don't want war. Just like Kat, humans are not naturally meant to kill each other. But if their paycheck depends upon it, if their retirement, their health care depends upon it, guess what? They will follow indoctrinations, as my friend calls them, the shave-headed death cult, and they'll murder people who they don't know. So I think it's really important as we have this conversation and freedom in general to use accurate language. And just like taxation is theft or taxation is robbery, extortion, war is mass murder, statism is slavery. And so just when I started to learn about these things for myself, because my mind had indoctrination too, I had no moral compass. I wasn't able to determine rights from wrongs and a justified killing from just a blatant murder, which we saw in the news today. That one lady was in her own house and some guy just came in and shot her. And this is a side note. I'll give back to you. If a cop gets a call from a neighbor, they can just go in and violate your rights. It's like, this is a police state, no longer acceptable. So in this conversation in future, being transparent in the words, it's mass murder. And that woman got mass murder, I say, just regularly murdered in her house. It's not acceptable any longer. So this is why I have so much hope in Anarchapulco, all these freedom conferences, everybody who's participating. I hope we can get a lively conversation. This conversation can continue for perpetuity.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. Yeah, I want to throw this to the, to the community here, because something I want to touch on again is that these calls and the whole purpose of these calls is to build our community and get to be closer with each other, all of us, not just the four of us, but all of us collectively. And because we're doing this every week. We're going to be doing this down at Anarchapulco. We're going to be having these conversations with each other, with you guys. And so we're really stoked that you guys are here. You guys that came on last week, we want to see more and more of that every week. So if anyone wants to come on these calls, really, really happy to see so many people on the actual Zoom part of the call. Something that is really awesome is that we're broadcasting and live streaming these calls to multiple Facebook pages and to our YouTube channel. And we're getting engagement across all the platforms. It's so fucking cool. I'm not allowed to say fuck on this broadcast.
It's anarchy. It's anarchy. Okay, speaking of that, Evan, I would just like to give a shout out to Angel's View joining us on YouTube. We do have moderators who are watching our streams on Facebook and YouTube and all across the internet. So ask questions, speak out, say hi. We are going to do our best to kind of collaborate with all of the different mediums that are expressing this conversation right now. And just want to say thank you for joining us, guys.
Exactly. We are multi-platform, multi-channel, and I'm so happy you guys can join us. So, anyone from the audience want to jump in and say anything, just feel free to raise your hand and let us know you have a comment. Otherwise, let's start to unpack this topic a little bit. I want to talk about anarchy in small communities, but going all the way back to tribalism and warlords, because people do invade other people. And, going back to the beginning of time, there were peace-loving communities just doing their own thing. And then there's big bully community next door that's they got some resources. Why don't we take their land and rape and pillage their women and kill all their men or make them slaves? And that kind of thing happens. So I'm just wondering where that fits into kind of the borders and the statism, because it seems like where statism kind of grew was in enough of the small communities coming together that were we're stronger together, and we can be stronger together to where the next little neighboring warlord community won't be able to come and invade us if we're big and bad enough. And that's what I think is a really big selling point for statism, at least on the popular view. And what happens in terms of the fact that there are other countries with bombs. We're not living 2,000 years ago where maybe all this stuff was new and forming. And I'm just fascinated by that. Is this stuff possible? Last week, you guys kind of had me convinced that we don't need states to build the roads. The roads got built even by, the Donner Pass got made, right? We were talking about that. So this week, I want to be convinced that we don't need borders and that we don't need nation states at all. I've got a completely open mind. I'm filling the role of the open-minded skeptic that, hears about anarchy and wants to know more. So that's the role I'm kind of playing in this conversation. I'm going to be very open-minded. I want to hear all these ideas, but I might ask some inconvenient questions along the way.
Awesome. I would definitely like to just pop in, and then I'd love to hear what Verity has to say. But one of the interesting things that you said is that, you know, if you look back 2,000 years, and I think that's interesting because a lot of people will say something like that. Well, look at what happened in the past. We are not 2,000 years in the past. We have a very different culture. We have very different tools available to us. And in some ways, humanity has evolved, and we're just now at the point where we need to evolve even past government. When you see the way that it works now is that there are consequences, free market consequences. We all live in societies, and we want to be in these kind of modern societies. And there are consequences to attacking your neighbors. And then there are also ways that you can organize without forcing your other neighbors to help you protect yourself against the state, because again, it is the same thing, whether it's internal, whether it's the person next door that's attacking you for your resources, or the person in the next town over attacking you for your resources. But the good thing about freedom is that the people attacking you, if that does occur, they are going to have limited resources. Right now, if you look at the military industrial complex, you look at our government, they have unlimited resources to attack people all around the world, to create a hatred of the people living in this country, and we don't have any way to remove the resource. Oh, well, there are some ways, and that's what we're talking about right now as anarchists. But I mean, as a voter, you don't have any way to really remove the resources from the worst people in the world, these people who are committed to taking your resources and starting wars just so that they can convince you that you need them. So in the free market, let's just say we had a government that didn't use taxation, then what would happen is that once we saw they were going over to Syria or Yemen or Iraq or Iran for reasons unknown to us or not understood to us, we could say, no, I don't want to give you my money anymore. I'm withholding my money. And that really is a deterrent for anyone to start these conflicts that really require a lot of resources. So I think that's one thing we have to think about, is that the market is an answer.
That's a really good point. And then by withholding taxes, we starve the government for those resources that they need. And that's a really good point. Like when you just, again, buy into the taxation scheme that everyone's going to pay taxes, the government's always going to have unlimited money, it becomes really hard to think of it ever stopping. And then, you bring up that point where it's just like, well, wait a minute, all governments need the resources and they need the money. And then it opens the door to all of these solutions that we're exploring today. That's really, really awesome, Angel. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I want to throw it to Verity and hear what she has to say.
Absolutely. Hey, Verity, it's good to have you back this week. I just want to remind everyone that we're trying to, try to keep the comments on point and not go too long today. But we're really happy to have you back. And thank you so much for joining us. We got your camera on today, so thank you.
Yeah, I don't want to miss these. These are really intriguing topics and very dear to my heart. For years, I've felt that borders were unnecessary, especially when you learn about the fake governments, the de facto governments, and voting and all that jazz. But the thing about, well, it all comes down to money, drugs, corruption. You take money away, a whole myriad of things go away. And I know I'm looking way in the future, but that's where I'm at. I live in reality, but I know what the future looks like. I've seen it. I live on Belize, and I have to go to immigration every 30 days to get my passport stamped to stay here. I have to pay to live on the planet. And it just irks me because I don't feel that any of us should have to pay anywhere to dwell wherever we want to dwell. So that's one thing that really irritates me. War infuriates me. I just say if the politicians are so gung-ho about going to war, let them battle it out to each other. Don't send our guys out there. But a lot of them are not educated. They're from the time they're in boot camp, they're isolated. They're programmed. Of course, we've all been programmed, since we were kids, which is another thing about unschooling your children. How wonderful, because they're not going to get this mind programming that they have to someday deprogram, like most of us probably have here. So, and talking about security and all that, like even with the resort, I never saw any security. I didn't want fences and all that. But in the reality of it is there's poachers that still come here from other countries and interrupt the habitats or kill animals for their teeth, their fur, without caring about the animal. And so, yeah, it's really sad, but I do agree with Angel. We can make a difference. We just got to reach the masses, and we're more than the 1%. Actually, it's under the 1%ers. Yeah. But you take money out of the equation, there goes poverty, there goes greed, there goes, human trafficking, all this stuff that we're dealing with now that weren't even around probably a couple 3,000 years ago.
That's thank you so much for that input, and let's throw it out to I got some other people raising their hands, so let's get a few people to give some input and then turn it back to the conversation, talk about what everybody's sharing, because that's really interesting stuff. And who else is here? I think Ray Terrace wants to say a few words. Are you here, Ray? I think Ray needs to be unmuted.
I have a few things to say if that's okay before he becomes unmuted, because something Verity said felt really important to me, is that she has her property and she's thought about to fence or not to fence. And so to border, to not to border, it really comes down to property rights and voluntary agreements. And I think what we're looking at right now with borders between countries are groups of people that are assuming authority over other people's property. I can't open my land to someone who doesn't have a passport because the U.S. government says that they can't come onto my land without a green card or a visa or whatever. And, so should we be able to create borders on our own property? Of course, because there are going to be poachers, there are going to be criminals, there are going to be people who try to take and who want to, have what others have. We have a right to protect that which is ours. But we don't have a right to tell other people if they're allowed to let other people cross their border and come onto their property or not. And I think that's a really fine line. And that line is I
lost you.
Yeah, I think, Kat, you just froze. So now we are going to throw, we're going to come back to that as soon as Kat unfreezes. But let's go to Ray Terrace. And how's it going, Ray? Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, pretty good. I wouldn't miss this for anything. I'm originally from England, and I've traveled around Europe extensively, the whole of North America, Caribbean, parts of South America. And everywhere I go, I live in and amongst the people. And I don't think I know anybody who is in favor of war. People can get along great if they get to know each other. And with the internet, that will help a lot. And somebody mentioned it's 1% who are the real nasty troublemakers. That's all we have to control is the 1%. And I really believe that between us, all of us, with education, we can do that. There won't be the sort of pack agreement that these dictators can whip up, because people will understand, no, we don't want this. That's just one grubby little person who wants more than their share or something, That was
Absolutely.
About it.
It's something Verity said just keeps coming back into my head. I'm sorry, I'm like one person behind. Now I got Ray talking. I'm going to comment on what Verity said, but then I'll come back to what Ray said. The idea that we have to pay to live on land, that even if you own property, you have to pay property tax, or where Verity's living and believes that she has to pay, a fee every several months or something. it's on so many levels. They take away the freedom and the sovereignty.
It's every month. And they do that on the states too. Anybody that crosses that border with a passport, they have to pay immigration every month.
So what's coming to mind with what Ray said, which I'll touch on, is Occupy Wall Street, and like what happened there, where like the mass of people kind of had enough and they rose up. But this is where, we can talk about the lack of leadership, because there was no leader of that movement and there was no singular voice. And the news was out there just putting microphones in front of random people's faces who didn't always have a clear message. The whole movement kind of fell apart and became just, washed over. But like for a second there, it was like the Arab Spring, where like it seemed like the people were going to rise up, and for a second there was maybe going to be something. And then all of a sudden, the powers that be come and they quash everything and they start cracking some heads, and then everyone gets back in line. The question I have is, when there are so many people who are not on board with the war agenda, with the state control of everything agenda. Just yesterday, Governor Newsom in California passed this law that allows anybody to rat on anybody that they think is dangerous, and then the police can just come into your house and take all your guns. And then you have to prove that you're not dangerous. It's a red flag law. And so we're going to get into that in a different week. But it's just like, the pressure is building. It's like a pressure cooker. I think there's enough people, and there's almost a critical mass of people who are just fed up. And that's why we're all here. We want to explore these solutions. But what real power do we have when we have the crushing, gripping, blows of the state with all of their weaponry and all of the mass media and everything? I want to hear from all you guys on that. Like, what do we really have besides to, talk about it? Angel.
So just something Ray said, because I think it cannot be stressed enough. He said he travels around the world and he talked to different people in different communities, and no one's ever pro-war. People are never rearing to go to war. People are scared. People are scared. They look at the news, the media, and they see all these threats. But all of those threats are just perceived threats. And those threats are who the government is always just trying to get in between us and tell us that we need to make enemies of other people, and that we should be fearful of what they're going to do to us if the government isn't there to watch over everyone. But in general, because even in the US, like the Conservative Party, people will call that the party of war or the pro-war party. But when you look at what these people actually value, it's not war, it's security, it's protection. And I think if they understood that we are made less secure by having a government that is constantly putting its tentacles in different cultures and trying to control people, they would be a lot safer. And so that's the challenge for us, is to make people understand. And that's why it was so cool when Ron Paul got up on the stage during the debates and he said, they don't hate us because we're free. They hate us because we've been in their countries. We're, like all the Iraqi children, and just, and for me personally, that was a huge moment, a huge aha, because I did not understand what was happening in Iraq when we first went into this war. And all I had heard was our president say, they hate us for our freedoms, and just all this gobbledygook that doesn't really mean anything. But I kind of, in those days, I kind of just go, okay, well, I guess that's what it is. But the moment he said, hey, this is what we've been doing in those countries, all the pieces clicked. And it was like, okay, now that I really understand what's happening, now I understand what kinds of solutions we need. And that's why they never want to tell us what's actually happening. They always have to fearmonger. But yeah, our neighbors don't want to go to war. And I think we don't have to be scared of what happens when the government isn't there, because we're going to be okay. People are peaceful when you're not poking them with sticks.
Yeah, Ray, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, if I could I very quickly tell you a bit a beautiful thing that happened to me when I was younger.
Yeah.
Please.
I'm an older guy. I grew up right after the war, and all of my uncles and parents and so on were in the war. Now, one of my uncles, he was in Africa and was one of these poor souls that got captured and were forced marched across the Alps into the POW camps. Now, we were told, oh, the Huns are bad, you know, the Nazis there, so the Germans, blah, 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 blah. Well, we went on holiday to Spain with my uncle, Eddie, and we were sitting outside, and across from us were two German couples. And my uncle and one of the German couples kept looking at each other, and my aunt was getting a little worried because, you know, we hate Germans, right? Finally, my uncle got up and he walked over and he looked at one of the guys. He said, I know you. You're one of the guards that was in the prison camp. And the other guy said, yes, you're Eddie. You always made us laugh. And Eddie said, yeah. And you're, I forget his name, but you always shared your food with us. They spent the rest of that holiday together, totally close knit. So, yeah, we're forced into hating other people, and it's just not true.
Yeah, there's so much more that unites us than divides us. That's really beautiful, Ray. Thank you so much for that. It's really like, it's so true. You know, we have to be propagandized and told to fear people over and over again. I mean, you think what happened in all the different countries where there's genocides, you know, it starts with like propaganda and being told how bad and evil the other people are. And
on that, Evan?
Wow. David, jump in, please.
Yeah, so just like Ray just mentioned, nobody likes war. So we're propagandized, as you just mentioned. So this is why I think some of the mothers here and other people on the call and people watching this later on, if you can get your kids out of the school system, that indoctrination is so deep. And some of you know, like when you pledge allegiance, you're pledging allegiance to the state, right? The republic for which it stands. So why not pledge allegiance to your family or your values or your faith, something that actually matters in life, to distinguish between that. And so the challenge is that some of us, like in my family, I have family members who hang these gang symbols, flags, in their places of business or work. And so there's a strong attachment to it. So understanding that the flag worship is a critical part of their religion, because it is a religion of authority, that someone else has the right to rule me or other people or my property. And that's drilled into us from a young age. And so if we're lucky enough to see Ron Paul in the debate, or maybe come to this event, or other speakers and authors out there, you can see that like this is a deep rabbit hole. So to pull out, we're very fortunate. Now it's like we got to help other people see that this is a death cult. And like it's what Julius Caesar wrote about in his books, the divide and conquer strategy. So anytime you talk about religion or politics or media, all these things are meant to divide us. And this is the age-old tactic that they use to put races and religions and things against each other, when naturally we all want peace. We just want to raise our family, make some love, make some food, and dance and sing and have a great life experience. But then there's this criminal organization who is wrapped in an iron fist, wrapped in a velvet glove, that says we're here to help you, when in reality it's indoctrination. So I think one of the ways you're talking about, Evan, is what can we do? One is to remove the children, and then as Cal was talking about, it's funny money, and the age of death or the mass, all these wars happened in the century of the Federal Reserve, because these soldiers need money. So that's the two things I think really important. So perhaps that's where cryptocurrency and the blockchain technology could be a solution as well.
Yeah, I can't wait to get to Crypto Week. That's going to be awesome. Everyone who's watching, who's been down to Acapulco, we've got a whole Cryptopulco thing going on down there, where there's like a whole crypto stage, all crypto all day long. So, we're talking and the Fed in one part, and we're talking all cryptocurrency in the other part. It's so exciting, man. I wish we could unpack this entire series all at the same time. There's so many things to talk about. Hey, Catherine, I want to hear from you. I feel like I haven't heard from you for a while. And do you have input?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, David, I want to respond to something that you said about the flag and it being a gang sign. And I want to come from a slightly different angle here, because some people really do see it as a symbol of peace and freedom. And so I think it's really important that when we are trying to spread the word of peace and freedom, that we are sensitive to these things, because people have been educated in the system that really glorifies the way things are in the status quo. And some people really, truly believe that the military-industrial complex, as we see it, is out there defending us, because they genuinely believe that there is a threat. So to them, it's not a gang symbol. To them, it's a symbol of freedom. And so how do we then navigate that and help people to see that what is happening is actually making us at risk of being left free? Because when we are out there putting billions of dollars into weaponry and war and violence, it incentivizes people to fight back, because they either want to defend themselves, or, that we all know that like IBM and certain companies have played both sides of every war. They monetize and make money from both sides. And so who's gaining here? It's the politicians, it's the people who are in charge. And I just want to make sure that we're being sensitive to that when we are talking about freedom and anarchy, because there might be people on this call here who are brand new to this idea. And I don't want to turn anybody here away. And I want to meet you where you are and see if we could walk on this journey together. And I think one of the solutions, because I saw a question flash up here on the Zoom chat, was, who's going to take care of, slave owners? Like, who's going to handle that? Who's going to deal with violence? Who's going to manage all that? And there's a couple things that I think work really well. And one is ostracism. If people are behaving in violent and aggressive ways, don't give them money. Don't travel to their region. And another way is activism. Use your voice. Act. Make changes. Do things. Get the neighboring towns together and show up and say, these people you've enslaved have a right to life, and we're here to take them away from you. Because they're not your property, they're human beings, and they have a right to exist, right? So there's ways that we can handle this. And there was a question from D Live: how much government are you talking about having? Because what keeps you from being overtaken by a group of organized people? This is from SWAT Cats. And who would stop the slave owners? That's where I saw that question. And so for me, it's how much government. It's up to that community, and it needs to be voluntary, right? So if you want to have a territory, a region, a neighborhood, a household, a property, whatever it may be, where it's let loose, do whatever you want, as long as everyone there is living in consensual, voluntary agreements, have as many rules or non-rules as you want. The problem becomes when people are being forced to abide by rules that they have a moral conflict with, and they're unable to go to another geographic region or stay in their own geographic region and live in a way that feels good with them. So how much government? I think that's up to each community. But to me, the idea that more guns, more government, more security means more freedom is wrong. There are so many examples across the globe of peaceful, non-interventionist, small communities or even bigger communities like Sweden and the Norwegian area. These are peaceful areas. No one's going and blowing them up or dropping bombs on them or threatening to go to war with them. And they're not doing that either. And so, there is something to be said about, I'm going to protect my fence, and I'm going to have guns, and I'm going to get anyone who comes onto my property. And there's also something to be said about, hey, here's some harvest. Let's share. Let's break bread together. Let's be community. Let's get to know each other. And I think it's really up to everyone's discretion. As long as you're not hurting other people, the size of the voluntary government that you choose to have, the amount of rules in the voluntary government you choose to have, it doesn't matter as long as no one is there under coercion or force.
I love that. I love it. whenever we talk about property, and when you talk about property and, whether the right to protect your property or invading someone else's property, it brings me back to a fundamental question that I have for you guys, which is like, property used to be doled out in the feudal system, and there used to be the king who would control all the land, and then he would give it to his cronies, and they would, have their serfs that would work the land. That turned into kind of a property system where we could buy property from the government, and parcels of land were attached kind of a monetary value. How do we unpack property itself? Because anarchists respect other people's rights and other people's property, but how did property become someone else's to begin with? And was that legit? And at what point in the calendar do we say, okay, everyone who has property from this date on, we have to respect that? Or, if there's no government, I know you believe in homesteading, and I'm really interested in that, because kind of like, let's say you put your work on the land and you've got this big piece of public land and you build your house there and you live there, and then someone shows up, starts to put some work on some part of the land, and then says, well, now it's their land. I just don't get how, if there's, again, I'm playing a role here. I hope everyone appreciates that who's watching. Like, if you don't have a state government role to say, we tell everyone where the parcels are and how big they are and where the property is, and everyone has to respect those rights because that way it's kind of fair. How do you, that's just a lot of shit I threw on the table, but I think you know where I'm coming with that. I want to throw it to everybody to unpack that a little bit.
Okay, so I will say a little bit about that. But first I want to say what I'm about to say is not going to be nearly as great as what Murray Rothbard has had to say about this. Or if you go to Mises.org, if you really want to understand how this could work, I definitely recommend that you go to Mises.org and like Google, do a search for this issue, and you're going to get a wealth of information that'll help you to understand better, so that when you're talking to people, you know what to say. But the gist of it is homesteading, right? You mix your labor with the soil, and that's how something becomes yours. And you could put a fence around a certain amount of area, and it becomes yours as long as you're making use of it. There's going to be conflict for sure, and the question for me is also one of those questions of resources. If someone has limited resources, I think that they are going to homestead an area and homestead as much as they believe they can defend, right? And that way it doesn't become one person claiming all of the, like Yertle the turtle, claiming all of the land that they can see. So I think that's part of it, is that if you don't have a state defending your property rights and you have to defend your own property, then there's a limit on how much you're willing to take on. But right now, it's really the only way it's the only way that makes sense, is that you have done something and created something. And once you create something, it belongs to you and you can transfer that property or not. There aren't a lot of other great solutions. Now, how do you go far back in time? There's so many different ideas about this, because who's the valid landowner? Like if you think about all these corporations that own all this land, but they take subsidies from the government. This is not an easy one to answer, but I think it's a much more difficult question to answer. A more difficult question is, how many people are we willing to let die around the world because we don't want to take the time to really individually in our smaller areas work out the situation of property rights? So, but again, I want to say go to Mises.org and check out all the different writings on the topic.
Sweet. And possibly if there's a writing that you love, particular one, we can do that in here. You know what I mean? Maybe in one of the other weeks, we can even send it out to everybody who's on the call as a supplementary reading or something, if we're going to get into that. I have a feeling these conversations are going to continue beyond these 12 weeks, but that's just it's just a gut feeling.
I don't disagree.
Anyone from the community want to come in and say anything? We definitely want to hear from more people. And I see you guys on the call. We can also read some comments that are being chatted in as well. If there's anything, Catherine, if you want to pull in any comments from the chat.
Well, there's something I really wanted to bring up, and it's a community in Mexico who I think is a living example of what Angel was just discussing. And this is a village called Chiron. And this is a community in the mountains in Mexico. I've been there. It's beautiful. It's amazing. And what happened there is that there were cartels who came in and were clear cutting the timber from the forest. And the indigenous people there believed that the forest belonged to the people. And it's where their water supply came from. And while we were there, we actually watched cattle come up and drink from this creek that's oozing out of the water, right? And so as these trees are being clear cut, the water starts to dry up, because what do roots do, right? They pull water up from deep in the ground, and then it oozes back out into these creeks and into these rivers. And they decided to take action into their own hands. I mean, you had this state of sorts, Mexico, who is overseeing this federal property. And then you had this, little mini state of the cartel, I don't know which one, who came in and started cutting down all the trees. And they had their little arrangement, like, I'm going to run my drugs and cut the trees, and you're going to let me do it, and I'm going to cut you in. And everybody was winning except the people of Chiron. And what happened is the women rose up. And the women started blocking the trucks from driving down the hill and leaving with all of the timber, because the women were tired of seeing their families suffer. And what happened is these people took their land back, and then they created a perimeter. And they said, this is ours. Leave us alone. And they began planting trees, and they came up with their own set of rules. And we discussed some of those last week, how they only do verbal votes. They don't do yard signs and campaigning. It's everything is face to face, belly to belly. But here's the deal. When you drive into Chiron, you drive through a checkpoint, and it looks like a military checkpoint, but it is their local people with weapons, and they want to know who you are, because they don't want politicians coming in, and they don't want cartel members coming in, and they are not going to let people come destroy their land anymore. And so what happened is this group of people came together, and they said, you want to go rape and pillage forests in other mountain areas? Go do it, but you're not doing it here. This is our home. This is our land, and we are going to protect it. And they did. Now the trees are growing back. It's been 8.5 years since the forest got clear cut. And walking through a forest that has been through this is really fascinating. The water's starting to come back. The trees are starting to grow. The whole community is involved, but they share a common idea and philosophy, which is that nobody owns that land. Now, sure, people have their own houses and their own homes, but you and I can't move there. You have to be born there, or you have to marry into it. They don't let people just come in because they don't want their way of life taken from them. And so for me, this is a really beautiful example of a group of people saying, this is how we want to exist on this land that our generational families have grown up living. We want to continue this way of life. Here's outsiders coming in, trying to change it. And the thing about the human condition is we have to let it get so bad that we push people away and tell them to stop sometimes. And this happens in interpersonal relationships, marriages, co-working, when you storm out of the office in a blaze of fire because you're like, I quit. I can't take it anymore. And that's what happened. They said they quit. They can't take it anymore. And they refuse to let these people destroy their land, destroy their water supply. They've reclaimed it. They're coming up on 9 years of living in sovereignty. And I think that this is such a beautiful example, because not only are they doing it now in real time, but they took on a federal government and they took on the cartels. And those are two of the scariest institutions that you could possibly take on.
Absolutely. That is like the most amazing story I've ever heard. How many Chiron are there?
I don't remember how many people are there, but it's like 10,000 or something. It's a very small community. I mean, yeah. 20,000? Okay.
28,000.
28,000. Okay. When we went walking through the community, I mean, there is not one corporate restaurant at all. Not one. Absolutely don't exist. And what I thought was super interesting is that we happened to be there on, excuse me, St. Guadalupe Day, December 5th or 6th. And they were blowing up homemade fireworks all over the entire city. I mean, it was amazing. The city was alive.
Wow. I mean, that's a lot at 28,000 people. You know what I mean? That's a lot. Even if it was first I saw 3,000, then I heard 28, but it's like thousands of people living together, protecting their land from cartels and from other, corporate invaders. Obviously, I've never heard that on American news. I wonder why they haven't.
Well, they would have been demonized. They would have been demonized on American news. They would have been called, insurgents or something.
Yeah.
And the thing is, they're living in partnership with the land, and so they're extracting sap from the trees in a sustainable way, and they're creating resin, and they're selling it internationally. They have international distribution of their pine cleaning products. And we went and visited, where they were extracting those. And we were talking to them, are you going to start doing essential oils? I'll buy your essential oils, I mean, they are industrious, and they're so community based. And when we were walking through their community, I mean, look at me. I stand out like a sore thumb in an indigenous community, right? I mean, in Mexico, I have freckles, I'm polka dotted, I'm white, my children are blonde, and people are walking up to us and they're like, I speak English. Hi. And they were so excited that we were there. And I just thought that was so neat that, we got through the checkpoint and we were welcome. There's one hotel in the entire place. That is how few outsiders actually come into this space, and they're welcoming. They weren't like, who are you? Why are you here? They were like, hey, hi, let me tell you about when I went to Texas, when I lived in San Antonio for 3 years. And I mean, it was just the neatest experience I've ever had. And to me, it just showed me that we can do that too. We can do that in the United States. We can do that in Canada. We can do that in Europe.
I'm asking a lot of questions about this, because here is a real life community with multiple thousands of people, and are, possibly as many as 20 some odd thousand people. How do they have centralized rules that apply to all 28,000 of them, or are they little mini sub-communities within their community that are self-governing?
Well, when we were driving through, you could see that there were little areas that just kind of naturally congregated together. But there's a city center, so to speak, with, the stone roads and stores and shopkeepes. And from what I understand, because we met with the elders of the city, and everything is verbal, so that they don't have written rules that you have to abide by. These are the traditions passed down culturally. And so if you're out of alignment, everybody knows, because it's not like when you get pulled over in the United States and it's like, well, ignorance of the law is no excuse. Well, you can't be ignorant of the law, because it's simple enough that everybody is raised in this way. And it's quite beautiful, I think, because they don't have to write things down. They don't have to have a vote. They have a conversation.
It's amazing. It reminds me in a totally different way of those villages I've heard of, where if somebody commits a crime, they're kind of like everyone surrounds them and they tell them that they love them and they believe in them and that they're beautiful people and they have more to offer. And it's like they kind of kill them with kindness, but it's kind of like they see the best in the person. So the person's own sense of self-shame. And then there's the other side where the community ostracizes. It's really interesting because both I've seen, that both can work. Super amazing conversation here.
Can I comment
love
on
to hear from
Sharon?
more people. Yeah, David, pop in for sure.
Yeah, let me talk about Sharon, because I saw some of the documentaries. I think Jeff Berwick's done one, Luke Radowski, some other guys. I think Vice did one as well. And so as it relates to statism, anarchy is the kryptonite to statism, right? This idea that we can rule ourselves. Sharon is like a beacon of light and hope. I was so excited to hear that you went there and learn about all these different ways. And then I think one of the really cool questions and ideas is freedom is very simple. So as the Constitution is like one document, like to supposedly to limit the state. And now you have like IRS codes and statutes. It's like a huge stack of like what we're not allowed to do. I think freedom is very simple. So like self-ownership, the non-aggression principle, and self-defense. I'm curious what the community or people watching now or later would think about that. But like you said, the rules got to be verbally agreed upon. And I've seen the films where they gather in their own little like neighborhoods. I think one neighborhood is like 500 people or something, and they got their representative and they go there. It's like, that's freaking awesome, man. That's how they do it. Verbally, they have the representative go to the main city, because like, how is this all going to work? Well, we can't solve it, instantly. But the fact that we don't want to initiate violence, and then the question of unalienable rights. This is what's so amazing to me, is like that was already agreed upon 250 years ago. So I think, as Kat mentioned, like once there's tyranny, we push back, or kind of we strike back with truth. And I think unalienable rights of my life and my liberty and my property, meaning my body, and then we mentioned our property line, our labor. Our labor is our property too. And like Angel mentioned, putting a fence up, in my opinion, putting a fence up doesn't make it my property. It's using my labor to transmute that land. So digging something, laying something, planting. I mean, this is kind of like in the gray area, and it's almost, minutia details, but we can work it out. But I think what Sharon's done is genius. The fact, like I'm in California and San Francisco, and I think New York has like a sugar tax, and they're just adding all these taxes. Like being in a metro urban area is not a place, for me at least, to have this ideal village or town. I think the future is going to be people getting their own land, whether it's 30 people, 500 people, and working out these questions. And for me, it's like the code of conduct. What's the code of conduct in my village? The voluntary villages is the idea that I'm really interested in. But I love what Sharon's doing. I hope there's got to be more cities out there. So if you guys hear about other ones, let us know, because I want to go visit. I want to go visit Sharon and see how they're doing it down there. And then I want to do it for my own and help other people do that too, so we can get out of this tyranny.
Absolutely. I want to go there with you. Hey, Angel, I share your question that you typed in there. So can you ask that to everybody?
I'm just wondering, they're this mini micro free society, but how are they getting around the Mexican state laws? What's the interaction between the local community and the Mexican state?
Well, something that I noticed is that the cars had license plates on them, right? That they are, when they are stepping out of their area, they are still engaging in legal activity. But I think that they're treated sort of how the reservations in the United States are treated, right? So like the Navajo Nation, they're allowed to self-govern, but once they cross into non-Navajo territory, they need to abide by the United States laws. So that's my understanding after visiting there and talking to them and kind of watching how they interact. But I don't believe that there's hostile relations right now. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when they were trying to stop the clear cutting of their forests, I don't know that that was necessarily the case. There was probably much more, contentiousness between the two.
I wonder if they have to pay property taxes, or they had to buy the land from the Mexican government, or there must have been some transaction that kind of makes it their property, or was it indigenous land?
It was indigenous land, and they took it back by force. Wow. I don't necessarily want to say everything that I heard that went on, but they had a memorial at the greenhouse of burned trucks. Okay, they lit these trucks on fire, and I'm not advocating for violence, right? I want to make that very clear, and I don't think that that is the way, but these people were losing their ability to sustain themselves. And it is indigenous land to the point where there are still shepherds. When we were there, shepherds were herding their flock up to the watering hole. And I'm just like, this is incredible to me. This is shared, sacred, holy water to them. This is the shared, sacred, holy forest to them. And they don't want to own it. They don't want to grab it. They believe the community does. So they actually send the children out every year with these little seedlings. We did a tour of their greenhouse, and tens of thousands of baby pine trees. And they had 3 different species growing. And the children go out in school buses once a year and plant a new generation of trees. So the whole community is literally putting their hands into the ground. And so what you're saying, David, transmuting it, they're doing it together. They're transmuting the land as a tribe, and they are doing it in a way that is sustainable and that is bringing not only economic growth for them through the products that they're creating, but it's bringing their water back. It is bringing their spirituality back. It is bringing their joy back. It is bringing their sacredness to life back. And can you imagine how empowering that must be? Especially women on this planet who are often, kind of pushed down by the patriarchy, and that's another conversation. But for the women to rise up, for things to be that bad, that the women stood in the road and blocked the trucks from coming down. And when those truckers, those loggers acted violently against the women, the community stood up and said, don't hurt our mothers, don't hurt our sisters, don't hurt our daughters. We are not going to allow this to happen. And so, this was really, I believe it was self-defense. But, I do want to make it clear that it wasn't a peaceful thing. And that's the other thing, is that peace doesn't really exist in nature. There's hurricanes, there's tornadoes, there's, the gazelle getting hunted by the lion. And I think what matters, we raise our voices, we get animated, right? Like, peace isn't necessarily something that we need all the time, because sometimes breaking the peace allows us to shift things in a way to protect ourselves, to move culture in a different way. But that doesn't mean that we need to coerce anyone or aggress upon anyone. This is an instance of self-defense, or, there's no justice, no peace. We could use our words and we can speak and we can speak. And their community was speaking and speaking and speaking, and they were not being heard. And so they used their feet and they stood in the road, and it started this little tiny, beautiful anarchist uprising, and they won, and they're still winning. And who knows what will happen in the future as they get more and more media attention. Maybe the state will come in and try to squish that, and then stomp down on it because people are getting an idea of it. But my partner Paolo just told me about a community in Italy. And these pockets, they exist all over the world. And I really want to go visit this place in Italy. And the capital of this place, Reggio Emilia, it happens to be the name of the city where this anarchist uprising took place in Italy, and where this pocket of people live. It's the type of academic education my children are receiving 3 days a week at a school that they go to. It's Reggio Emilia, and it's child-led, child-inspired education where they really kind of lead the day. And I just think that's so interesting that here you have this little anarchist community in Italy, and their education model is being used by this anarchist family here in the United States. It just shows you the power of ideas.
Yeah, the power of ideas are amazing. I want to, what I'm taking away from this Chiron discussion, and then I want to throw this kind of idea back to you guys, is, so you've got this self-governing community. It's within Mexico. It's possible that they have to have some relations with the statism of Mexico. But it's very unlikely that any foreign country that they're not located in is going to invade Chiron, right? So I don't think that any other foreign nation is going to try to invade Chiron, right? So that leads to our topic today of war and border security. Is it really necessary? War, what is it good for? I'm starting to be convinced, because I'm starting to see that you've got this self-governing community. Yes, there are issues, but is it really self-governing? Can Mexico government come in and quash it? Can corporations make a deal with Mexican government to come in and quash it? Maybe, possibly, and that would be horrible, and we can talk about that later. But for now, it seems like the country of Canada, or we're not going to see an invasion of Chiron. So that is really interesting to me, because they can be self-governing to a certain extent. But where I want to talk about international relations, because let's say there's these self-governing communities in Chiron, and there's one in Italy, right? And there's others in other parts of the world, and we have the internet, and we have the ability to do worldwide shipping. Are we seeing any cooperation kind of globally between big communities yet? or are we just starting to see the kind of birthing of these communities that are existing? I'm almost thinking of an alternative model of nation states, which is really communities cooperating with other self-governing communities and trying to kind of bypass the whole state thing. Does that make any sense at all?
Yes, and I do know of an example. I wouldn't call it international because it's more local, but in Ohio, there's a community called Raven Rocks Eco Village. And in this part of Ohio, it's east and it's south of I-70. So east of Columbus, south of I-70, there is a huge concentration of intentional communities. And so the Raven Rocks Eco Village, they make kombucha, they raise beef cattle, they have eggs. They barter with the Amish community for tinctures, for butter. They barter with the Hare Krishna community. So here you have these very different communities. You have this Raven Rocks Eco Village. You have these Amish. You have the Hare Krishnas, right? I mean, these are extremely different groups, but they're working together. They're doing business together. Some of the kids who live on Raven Rocks Eco Village go do yoga at the Hare Krishna temple. So this is a really, really micro version of what you just asked about. And then, of course, Sharon is already doing business internationally with their pine products. So I do think as the internet begins to grow, there's this website called numundo.org, NUMUNDO.org. And it's like the Airbnb of eco villages. And so as these types of things start to grow and communities start to get to know each other better, I think we are definitely headed in that direction, Evan, for sure.
Wow. So New Mundo, just really quickly before I bounce this around, does that mean that people like us can go and stay and visit these villages by going through New Mundo and making arrangements? Is that what the Airbnb,
yes.
Is that what that means? 'Cause that's kind of amazing.
Yeah, and the founder of New Mundo actually spoke on the health and wellness stage last year at Anarchapulco. So they are friends, they are community, they blog on my website, thehomestead.guru, and what I think is so neat about them is that they are global and there are multiple communities in Mexico. I really want to just take like 6 months and go visit every single one of them. We jammed in a bunch last winter driving up for Christmas, but it just wasn't enough time because we planned to spend 2 days in Chiron and then we didn't want to leave. We're like, we need at least 2 weeks here, but we got 5 days, you know? And so what I would really like to do is at some point manifest the ability to actually go do a deep dive with all these communities, because some of them are startup, but a lot of them have been in existence since the 70s. And these are long-term stable communities that just haven't really mastered the internet yet. And so what happens when we start visiting all of them and trading goods between all of them? I mean, whoa, the potential for freedom becomes exponential at that point.
I'm getting super excited by all of this. I love this. I mean, I love the idea of being able to travel and see these different things and almost embed there. And to whatever extent they would want or invite us to do so, to be able to share their stories and kind of tell their stories. I'd love to have, by the way, if you guys reach out to any New Mundo or Chiron people and they want to come on this call, like any one of these weeks, it would be amazing to have some people kind of share how they're living anarchy in these successful communities. That would be amazing. Since we've kind of been introducing the topics and talking about them a little, that would be fantastic. So we're definitely past the hour, but like I'm fully into this conversation. I want to know how you guys are doing. Are there more community people who want to come in? Do you guys want to keep talking? We're completely open.
I wanted to comment on this topic.
For sure, Verity.
Well, and one thing, I do have a friend, Paul Chermak, who lives on Chiron. He's Australian, but he lives there. They accepted him. So that's pretty cool.
Nice.
He's a vegan chef. So yes, I definitely, well, he got my newsletter today, then he saw it in there, but I'll be talking with him because he should be on. I mean, I'd love to see him on this panel. As far as the one of the visions of Purple Paradise Resort is we want to build them all over the world. And so say that you come here first because Belize will be the first one. And then we have one, say, Tahiti or whatever. You want to go there, we're going to have our own electric-powered jets, and you can just schedule yourself and go. You still have to contribute there, but not on the day that you get there. You start the next day. But you can travel all around, and anybody that sisters with us. It means that they can't sell their products, but we will share anything that we have that another one of our sister resorts needs. Yeah, we'll be shipping our stuff. And it's not necessarily a barter. It's whatever you need, whatever we have in abundance, and vice versa. I don't like bondage. I just want to get rid of the whole thing. That's the vision I was given.
That's really cool. Thank you, Verity. Angel, did you want to pop in on there?
Before I forget about it, because I'm thinking about Sharon and how they are this community, and it makes me wonder if a good strategy for anarchists might not be on a very local level to capture your police departments. But I mean, really, like if you have a pro-freedom sheriff or, like the head of the police department, and you have really pro-freedom communities where the police officers don't enforce the laws, that's the first step in creating small freedom communities. And then to creating a bond so that if the larger state ever does come in and attack, you have essentially a militia. But I think maybe that's one, instead of making enemies of police officers, we should try to co-opt that. I mean, these people are armed, they work for the state, they're in charge of enforcing the laws. And if we really culturally change the shape of local police departments, we could have, because what I'm thinking about in Sharon is that those people choose their laws and they choose whatever the enforcement is within the community, and we need to do that as well.
So if you can't beat them, join them kind of thing?
Well, not really join them, right? I mean, it really has to be, like if you have a sheriff who's not going to be on his staff to give out tickets, so there's different steps in the process where we can start to take back a little bit and ease the pressure. I mean, I want them to be gone entirely, but if they are committed to a certain ideal, then that's better than the alternative right now. But that also goes back to what I was saying, I think 2 weeks ago, is that police officers so frequently don't live in the communities. They're policing outsiders. And so if my neighbor was the one policing me, he would never walk over to my door and shoot me. He would know I'm Angel with two kids who likes to play video games in the middle of the night. You know what I mean? And so that's what I'm thinking. It's really...
Yeah. So it looks like we're sharing the New Mundo website here.
Yeah, so there's over 800 centers globally, and I had asked that we just pop this up here so people could see. They take cryptocurrency. So if you are trying to really get out of the system and live off the grid, this is a way where you can basically travel the world. I mean, if you buy your plane tickets with cheapair.com and you stay at these properties, living off cryptocurrency, earning cryptocurrency, you're basically off the grid other than your passport to get between each of these countries. And, there's all sorts of different projects about that as well, like BitNation and these different groups where, they're either trying to create their own passporting, system or creating their own country. There's ways that our movement is trying to get around that as well. But as you can see, I mean, 800 places across the globe where you can go and learn how to live off the land, how to live in community. You can probably host retreats at some of these facilities. You can live there and work there. You can just go and relax. So I just think this is the way of the future. And I don't know. I wish that I could go visit all 800, honestly. Maybe I'll make that my bucket list.
It's an amazing thing because, I don't know if anyone here has ever been to Esalen or heard of Esalen, but when I was teaching yoga, I would do a lot of retreats up there. And Esselen's one of the first retreat centers in America. And it's in Big Sur, and it's got it's an amazing thing because people live there and they work there. And they have their own gardens and they plant their own food and they kind of tend to the land, but you can also go and stay there. And then you can, take workshops and stuff there. But if you're going to live there, you have to work there. It doesn't, you don't pay to live there. You pay with your work. And so it's an amazing thing. It kind of coming up for me while I'm hearing all this stuff. This is who else wants to come in on this today? I mean, we've got I'm having fantasies of taking vacations and like taking off 2 years and going to live in all these intentional communities. And then coming to Anarchapulco and comparing notes every February. This is just incredible. Who else wants to jump in? I feel like I'm kind of sponging today. I have a lot to offer next week when we're into our natural healing. I'm going to share my story about pharmaceuticals and getting on them and off them and all of that stuff. So like today I have kind of less of my own personal stuff to share, and I'm really fascinated with everyone else. So I just want to hear from more people today about anything that we're talking about today. We're going to the next, this is what we're talking about next week, by the way. I think I should just announce to the crew that we're going to have to make next week a 2-hour show because there's too much to cover. And I'm hoping that some more people besides me will actually share their stories. So maybe next week will be a little more story sharing, but we want to hear next week from people who have vaccine injuries. We want to hear people who've gotten sick from flu shots, or any kind of stories with your experiences with big pharma, how you feel about the whole mandatory situation, flu shots, vaccines. We're going to talk about all the natural healing doctors who have mysteriously died in the last, couple of years. There's been like 75 plus strange kind of deaths. And we're going to talk about alternative health and healing. We're going to talk about the explosion of CBD. We can probably do a whole show on CBD, but all of these things kind of go together, which is what we're going to get into next week. So let's go ahead and take that slide down and come back to this week. And I want to put a call out to everybody on the call right now, just before we decide whether we're going to go another round or whether we're going to start our wrap-ups. Anyone watching on any of the platforms that wants to come on and say something or have us read one of your comments, like, now's the time. Chat it in if you have something that you want to join to the conversation. And yes.
It's Jessica, the voice behind the Anarchy symbol.
Oh my God, Jessica, the voice behind Anarchapulco. Welcome, Jessica.
I have a question because this is really a fascinating one. I like to say that I'm baby anarchist, and this is what I sort of constantly ask Jeff about all the time. I had an experience last year where I was in Israel, and I ended up going to Bethlehem. And for those who don't know, Bethlehem is a walled-in city that's essentially, in my experience, controlled by Israel. And the people of Bethlehem have to get permission to leave Bethlehem. So they're in a little circle. It's like 5 miles squared. That's not the right size of it, but it's not a very big area. And they're not free to come and go. They have to stay in their area and then get permission to leave. And often they can't leave. And that's really disturbing to me. And I wonder, what's interesting to me is, what is my obligation as a human on this planet to help people who are in a condition like that, where their personal rights are limited? And I think that's where we sort of start to wonder about, when we talk about war, as Angel was talking about, governments use fear that these, people are going to attack you. I feel privileged that I don't necessarily feel like I'm going to be protected or to be attacked, but I do wonder, like, where, if I'm so privileged and I have all these freedoms, how am I supposed to help someone who doesn't have the same freedoms? Do we just go about our business in my own little bubble and hope that everything's okay? Or am I actually supposed to be proactive and do something to make a difference?
Well, I have a question for you, Jessica, if I could answer a question with a question, because that's what Jewish people do. So my question for you is, there are so many things in the world. There are so many instances of oppression and of people suffering and being forced into things that they don't want to be in. And in a lot of countries. And The question is, is it like once you decide you want to help other people who are less fortunate than you, are you allowed to enjoy your life anymore? Are you allowed to go on, or does it all become a mission and you can't be happy until the last person is free? Or do you choose your cause and say, I can't help everyone, but I'm going to choose the Bethlehem cause and let somebody else deal with North Korea? Or am I going to, have to get on the soapbox for everything? I mean, and I'm not soapbox, but how do we, each of us can do something. We can help somebody, but we can't help everybody. And so that's kind of the question I wanted to throw back to you is, it would seem like when you really want to help someone, don't you just get in there and do it?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I guess I have to go get a flight to Bethlehem now.
Well, if you guys don't mind, I'd like to respond to that, because I think for me as an individual, I have had to come face to face with my codependent tendencies. And something that I have learned is that I like to overhelp when help isn't being asked for. And sometimes people can be in really bad situations, but if they're not asking for help and you're trying to help them, it doesn't mean anything's going to change. And there's a really good example for people who've read Harry Potter. The house elves. Hermione gets all worked up about the house elves working for free. And they're these little magical creatures that, like, in the kitchen of Hogwarts, they fix all the meals. And when she tries to free them and rally them to ask for a salary and to ask for a payment, they get upset, they get mad, and they resist and they push back against her and they say, this is who we are. This is how we do. And so I guess for me, because I tried to change everybody and help everybody and do it through politics and do it through activism. And what I've come to realize is that it requires a couple things. Are people willing to help themselves? Because if they're not helping themselves, it's not worth helping them. And are they asking for help? If they're not asking for help, it's not worth helping them. And are you passionate about it? And if those three conditions are met and you have the time, energy, financial resources to engage in helping them in some way, then yeah, go help. But ultimately there is suffering. Suffering is part of the human condition. And the Buddha talks about this. Like, this is part of the human condition. It is how we evolve and grow. And until someone is willing to do the work to change their circumstance, we can't do it for them. So they need to be asking for it, and they need to be willing to work by your side, or you're just going to be spinning your wheels and exhausting yourself. And boy, did I learn that the hard way myself with activism in the United States.
But I also want to add to that, Kat, because I definitely agree with that, because so much of what the government does is to tell us that we need to help people, and then we free them and they end up being refugees and living in war-torn countries. But there is a place for help. There is a place for those who really care about freeing other peoples in the world. Let's say we live in this free country and we're seeing other governments around the world attacking their people. One, open borders, right? If they can get out, it's kind of like with slavery. Like, they didn't really need to go to a war. They could have just said, you get on this side and you're free. And they would have, and the South would have had a bleed of people trying to go to the North, but that's not what happened. And in the same way, definitely open borders, being willing to sponsor someone who does get out, so that more people understand that getting out means that there's something on the end and it's on the other side of it, and it's better. But then beyond that, creating businesses or being part of businesses who have the same concerns as you, so that you guys can all pool your resources and use it to help in beneficial ways. And the benefit really of doing it outside of government is that it's so much easier to change tactics when things aren't working. It doesn't become some big political talk and like, oh, we can't pull out because of the optics. It becomes, we have limited resources. How can we most effectively use these to help the people? And I would much rather have people, not politicians, people who really care about these issues, like, problem solving in a real way. And that's not really what happens. So there is an avenue. It doesn't mean that you don't get to care about people in the rest of the world or help people in the rest of the world. But do understand that your passion is not everyone else's passion. What are you willing to give up in order to help those people? And you know what the thing is, there are so many people in the world who are willing to give up some of their resources to help you, to help other people. Let's just be a confederacy of the willing instead of pulling teeth and having people be forced into helping us.
It's beautiful. It really is, because it's like somebody said once, you can always, no matter where you think you are in your life, you can always find somebody who's not as well off as you. And you can always find somebody who you can help, because if you know one more thing than the person next to you, then that thing might be helpful for them to get into a better place. So like, if everyone would just help the person who needs help that's closest to them, then we can spread that kind of organically around the whole world. And it doesn't mean you can't help people for people over, you know? But really, really amazing. Thank you so much,
Can I comment on that as well?
Yeah, David.
Yeah, that was beautiful, man. Beautiful question, Jessica. This is a real good question about human obligation, right? So this is from the natural law perspective. I'm born, I owe nobody nothing. You know, if anything, maybe some love to my parents, you know, but like in terms of contractually, that would be maybe morally. But then the other side of it is that, yes, in, let's say, United States, there's a tradition of freedom. There's part of my spirit. I want to liberate the whole world, you know, like from the state and be able to have freedom. So is that a lofty? That's damn lofty, right? But the other side of it is that life is a comedy. Life is a tragedy, right? This is kind of the push and the pull of the whole situation. And it reminds me of the story of the young boy who was walking along the beach, and he was grabbing something and throwing it in the ground or throwing it in the ocean. And then the old man came over and he said, "Young man, what are you doing over here?" And he said, "Last night the tide went down. There's all these starfish on the beach. So when the sun comes up, all these starfish are going to die." And the old man is all jaded. And he says, "Young man, there's thousands of them. How can you even make a difference?" And the boy reaches down, grabs a starfish and throws it into the water. And he says, "I just made a difference for that one." So, you know, I can't change the whole world, but maybe I can help one guy, maybe help two. And through this community, through this conscious movement, I mean, that's what's happening here. This is why I love this community and this conversation with all you champions, because now we're talking about it, right? Like, I think anarchy maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago used to be something you could be afraid of. I mean, even just kind of putting this on the internet. But now we start to realize this is an actual solution, right? That we're not talking about left, right, Trump, Hillary, Biden. Like, I don't even watch the presidential election for like serious issues. I'm like watching it for comedy. But like, this is a real solution. Sharon, the New Mundo centers, thanks for sharing that one. Like, this stuff is happening because people are fed up with war. They're fed up with these criminals for decades. And now we have this new media so we can get the message out and we can learn. We can learn about Murray Rothbard for New Liberty. That audiobook changed my life. You know, we learn about these different resources, and through this conversation, maybe going to Belize or Acapulco or wherever we're going, I think there is a real opportunity to evolve beyond statism and find the solutions and work it out one by one so that we don't have to have the state involved and we just negotiate. Just like, you know, Bitcoin's peer-to-peer, I think humans are smart enough and bright enough. We can have solutions. And we'll be talking about next week with the health solutions. My gosh, another exciting conversation. But I wanted to share that aspect because I think that was a great question by Jessica.
Wow. Thank you so much, David. So like amazing passion, and like this discussion has been amazing. So I think we're going to do the wrap ups now. So what I'd like to do, because we're coming up on the 90-minute mark, and I think we've had a great conversation. Remember, anyone who's on here, if you know, as often happens, we hang up the call and 5 minutes later you think of something and like, oh man, I wish I would have asked whatever. Just make a note of it and throw it up in the chat. You know what I mean? And we can continue the conversation. These things are ongoing. So just because the call ends doesn't mean the conversation ends. The conversation's just beginning. We're just rolling it out. And hopefully these conversations that we do together are the instigator, for want of a better word, to get everybody into it. So let me throw this around. Let's do a round robin to Kat and Angel and David to do our goodbyes, and then I'll take it and I'll make the last announcements and sign off from there.
Okay. Go ahead, Angel.
Yeah, I always love talking to you guys about these issues, and a reminder that we have to be knowledgeable about what we're talking about, and there are so many resources out there because you are an advocate of liberty, and people are going to have questions, and they are going to be valid questions. They're voicing their valid concerns, and so being part of this conversation helps. Going out to get information helps. And one thing I really want to add too is that never forget that what we are advocating is going to bring more freedom. And the state that we are in right now, we find ourselves defending anarchy as if like everything is perfect. Like anyone can look around and not be happy about what's going on, and we're offering solutions, and they might not be perfect. We don't have perfect solutions, but we have solutions that really will address problems. So remember that. It's always great to see you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Angel. Kat?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. I absolutely love having these conversations in Anarchy with you guys. I love seeing all the chatter coming through on my screen and seeing it coming through on D Live and YouTube and Facebook. And just remember that this conversation is ongoing, as Evan said. Head over to the Facebook group. It is lively in there, and we love to hear your opinions. You can send an email to the team if you have stuff that you're interested in. Visit our website, anarchapulco.com. And just remember, the root of anarchy in a healthy, functional way is personal responsibility. And that means being responsible for our communities and our family and loving each other and lifting each other up and asking for help when you need it and being willing to help when other people need it. Because when we abrogate our authority and responsibility to higher powers, higher institutions, they are not going to be able to take care of us in the way we can take care of our community, whether it's a sick person in your neighborhood or, someone who's struggling financially. When we are delegating that to a centralized institution, our neighbors become statistics and numbers and cogs in a wheel, and that is not what we want. If we want to have strong functional communities, we need to have strong functional relationships. We need to be talking to each other, loving each other, rolling up our sleeves, transmuting the land, like David said. I love that so much. And as we start to work together, our dependency on the state will become less and less and less. And the money we're giving them will become less and less and less. And the attention we're giving them will become less and less and less. And at some point, hopefully we can starve the beast, and we can build our economy and our ecosystem so big that they are nothing but a blip on the radar for us. So peace and love to you. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Catherine. I love you guys.
Thanks so much, Catherine. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, it's awesome. The quote by Buckminster Fuller, you never change reality by fighting against it. You got to create a new model that makes the old model obsolete. I really think this is the meme of our generation. We have the polar opposites of freedom and slavery. We're seeing increased taxation, increased climate change, and increased fear-mongering and war and these things. This is all mind control. They're trying to get you into their game, and if we can just get out of their game, I like the analogy of the football game. You throw the Hail Marys, and you play the short game, right? This is between like politics and doing it local or just opting out of the system entirely. You do whatever you want to do. What I would say is that if you're on this call, you're watching this video, you're part of a major conscious awakening, and some of them are blind in the dark. They don't know what they're searching for, but I would say it's self-rule, it's self-leadership, it's voluntary, intentional communities, self-government. This is so exciting to me, and I'm so excited for the next few weeks. The next one's health, and man, you guys are beautiful beings. I have so much hope in you, not the presidents, not the politicians, it's you guys, and let's keep the conversation going on Facebook, Instagram, wherever we are on the social media planet. I think there's Float, there's everything. Start something there. Start your own group. You're a leader. We're all leaders. Let's build something and co-create something magical for next week.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David, Kat, Angel. So some final thoughts on, everything that's going on right here. Again, Hotel rooms are going to be available next week on the 22nd. We're definitely selling out this year. There's actually a couple of rooms. They're doing some construction in the hotel and some renovations. So there are some fewer rooms at the hotel this year than there were last year. And so we're definitely selling out all the rooms this year. So when they go online, you'll be able to get your hotel reservation right on anarchapulco.com. Just look at the menu and click the hotels tab, and you'll be able to see all the amazing rooms available. And we can't wait to see you down there. We are so excited. Like, we get to see each other on video every week, but we're going to get to party in person. And I just can't wait to like do it with all of you guys down there. This like whole thing about exploring these conversations and these topics, it's just week to week, it's getting better and better. So next week, I think, is going to get a lot more personal, because we're going to be talking about health, and health is a really personal issue. So I've got a lot of really high power impact stuff to share with you guys that I think you're going to enjoy. I got quite a story to share, and I'm hoping that it will allow a bunch of you to also feel comfortable sharing some crazy shit, because we do live in a sick world. The things that are being prescribed to us to kind of fix what they say is broken is just causing more problems. It's just like a cascading series of things that cause more disease and more pain. And so we're going to dive deep into that next week. And we really, really can't wait to hear from you guys and be all together with that. Just a couple more things. Spreading the word on personal freedom is really powerful, and it's helpful to all of us. So, at Anarchapulco, what we'd like to do is help everybody make some money in this process. We have a great affiliate program where you can kind of get involved and you can share the word about Anarchapulco, and you can make commissions on people who buy tickets with your links. So what you do is you go to our website, anarchapulco.com, and you look at the menu under Get Involved. And then under there, you'll be able to sign up as an affiliate. There's some affiliate training with screenshots. I'll show you what to do. You can also, under Get Involved, you can suggest speakers. You can sign up to volunteer. You could even submit yourself to be a performer. There's lots of ways for each of us to do our part. And there's so much great stuff happening at Anarchapulco. So, that's it. I'm super excited. I just want to say thank you to Catherine and Angel and David and all of you, and Jessica at Anarchapulco, and everyone who's coming to these conversations. You can catch the replays of this on YouTube and on our Facebook page. And next week, same place, same time, we will be here. So on behalf of all of us here today and the whole Anarchapulco team, we want to thank you for joining us in Conversations for Anarchy, and we'll see you next week. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Hey, great job hosting, Evan. See you guys next Tuesday.
Love you guys.
Worldwide.
Anarchapulco is so hype, I'm trying to tell ya. This the event of the year and best vacation ever. Ron Potter, Jeffrey Tucker, just to name a few. Get your tickets, you don't want to miss it. You should roll through, talking politics to health and self-improvement to investing. So many things, not one thing. Learn how to live life unchained, yeah. 4 days vibing on the beach, time to connect. All about growth, way more than a conference. This is Anarchapulco, yeah. Let's go.
You ain't seen nothing yet.